If you were like 30 years old today and you didn't have the portfolio and you were starting from scratch, what would you do?
Would I stay in LA? Probably not. Wait a minute. Only people that occupy warehouses are. Then the savings and loan crisis hits. My bank gets taken over, and I sign up with the Resolution Trust Corporation to be a consultant to liquidate the bank's real estate. We started making some money in real estate, and then he went to his investors, convinced them that, you can actually make money in real estate, and it was probably a really good time. There'll be a period when the opportunities will, just emerge.
Welcome to the podcast. My name is Taylor Avakian, and I'm here with my esteemed guest, Jeff Palmer. Jeff, you've owned real estate in California for 40 years. Is investing in California dead?
No, sometimes I have a dream and the dream is that I wake up and suddenly all my apartments are in Newport Beach, and it was just a nightmare.
Yeah.
I owned apartments in Los Angeles. So that's kind of the good dreams I have.
So it's Los Angeles that's been the real issue. It's been the real challenge for owners is the way that the city council and the politics have really made Los Angeles a very difficult place to be an owner. Why do you think that has occurred, and is there anything that we can do about that?
Well, it initially kind of goes back to the history of rent control. And
because you've owned here for 40 years. So what have you seen happen?
My family has owned even before that. So in 1977 or 78, I was a student at the Wharton school. And
what were you studying?
Economics and finance. I was a graduate student. And around that time, we had the Howard Jarvis group put out Prop 13. And rents were going up, prices were going up, everything was going up, 10, 12% per annum. In fact, there was a time I walked into a lender and showed him my performance, and he said, "You're only using 8% rent increases, conservative."
Wow.
Yeah, so that was back in the late 70s.
Because 78 was when Costa-Hawkins was put into play.
Yeah. Well, no, rent control, not Costa-Hawkins. Costa-Hawkins was like 96.
Got it.
So there was a campaign, and the apartment owners, like the equivalent to CAA, promised we're campaigning, your rents are going to go down. And that was a major selling point of Prop 13, that the apartment owners were going to pass on the tax savings
to the renters.
But unfortunately, the next year it gyrated up even higher.
Oh, geez.
And so there was sort of this revolution that occurred.
Do you remember what cap rates and interest rates were at that time?
78, they were like 9, 10%, and cap rates were 8 to 10%.
So they were still negatively leveraged.
They were positive, but that's not how people thought. You're thinking year one, right? When your rents are going up 7 or 8. I mean, someone said to me, "Hey, I want to buy on an 8 cap rate," and he showed it to me, and it was like a 6 cap rate. And I said, "Well, you said an 8 cap rate." He said, "Yeah, the third year." And he said to me, "Why would anybody be stupid enough to sell an apartment building the first year cap rate?" So that's where things were at. I mean, so yeah, cap rates, we had neutral leverage, but rents were going up so quickly that by the third year you were very positively leveraged.
And then they enacted rent control.
So the renters were very angry. We tried to fight it, and we tried to get the state to stop it. And I actually wrote a paper that debunked another guy's paper, and while I was actually at Wharton, but it didn't really. We lost, and rent control came. So, but it stayed stable, and it turned out that as inflation went down, it wasn't so bad. I mean, we got a min of 3 and a max of 8.
Okay.
And back then, if rents are going up 10, 12%, 8's good, right?
Yeah.
Tenant.
For the tenant.
So
was there always a supply demand issue in Los Angeles?
No. 70s and 80s, well, there was. The 70s and 80s, we had very high supply of both apartments, but a lot of them were, in the 70s, we had a very high supply, but sometime around maybe the late 70s, it switched to for sale. So condominiums became very popular to build in the late 70s. And so there was actually an overhang of supply in the early 80s. And so we did have some really healthy building in the 70s and 80s.
And that kind of projected things. Because it's funny, if I'm kind of a history nerd, so I remember one weekend I was wanting to look back at where cap rates, rents, things like that. And you'll see periods of time, like decades in Los Angeles, where the average rent is the same. Like the average rents stayed at, it was like $900 for 10 years or something. Maybe it fluctuated from 900 to 985, but it was stable. It wasn't this continued up and to the right trend.
Yeah, I don't think I remember it being stable in my time.
I think it's if it's the HUD website or something like that, you can go back and look and see. And there's these periods where you're like, oh, wow, the average rent came down for a little bit. And
well, no, rents do go down.
Yes.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
Yes.
So,
which I think we're in right now, a little bit comparative to where it was the peak.
Mildly going down. Right.
And so your family was in this and you graduated from Wharton. And then what was your next foray into saying, hey, I'm going to go raise money and buy as many buildings as I possibly can?
Well, I worked for many years. I worked until I was in my 30s.
What did you do?
I started with a firm called Kaufman and Broad, which is now Broad Homes. They were a home builder.
Okay.
And I was an acquisition person from them, and I flew around the country trying to buy Section 8 apartment buildings and joint venture and build Section 8 apartment buildings.
Wow, back in the 80s.
Yes, actually the late 70s.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then so you worked in
I did that, and then I tried to, the real estate market was on fire in 78 and 79. I mean, in 1980, it was just on fire. It just, going up like mad.
Was it 30 bids on homes kind of situation?
30 bids on on apartment buildings, they were just going up in value.
And cap rates were compressing and selling for lower and lower.
Well, cap rates, it was rents that were driving it. It wasn't cap rates.
Got it.
It was rents that were just massive. Well, that's why we got rent control.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
And I got an opportunity, a Philippine company. I was getting promoted very rapidly because everyone was going out and starting their own business then. It was so lucrative. So even though I was only a year or two in the business, I was promoted very highly up. And then someone approached me and said, hey, how would you like to partner with me? I'll pay your overhead and give you a cut of the deal. And you go out and do, what you're doing.
You find the deals.
For me. And then I did that for about, little less than a year, and we hit the first recession. There was the mini recession of 1980. And
what did that look like?
They decided it was just like now. They wanted to get rid of inflation. So I don't know if it was Volcker or the chairman before him, but they blasted interest rates up and everything came to a halt. You couldn't sell anything.
Oh, geez.
And everyone was pissed. No one, I don't know, might be a lesson for what's happening now. I mean, people were angry.
Yeah.
And the president and the Federal Reserve chickened out. And so they then radically lowered interest rates and the lights went back on and everything started selling again.
Interesting.
But during that time period, my partner had found Jesus and decided he didn't want to go into an ancillary business. So I was on the job market again, and I got a job as a project manager for a mortgage banker who had an equity division building and buying office buildings and apartments in LA County.
And when did the transition for you to then do your own thing? Because you mentioned to me that you an employee.
I'll give you the story on that. And so basically, when I was doing this venture, my current partner, I was introduced to my current partner. I met him, and he kind of kept in contact. He would call me and ask questions, and he kept, like I was almost becoming an in-house advisor for him. He just kept bugging me. So around, trying to get the dates correct, I think it was around 1989 or 80, sounds like around 89. He said, "Hey, how would you like to be my partner?" And I said, "Well, how much does that pay?" And he said, "It doesn't pay anything." And I was, doing really well.
Yeah.
With bonuses.
Yeah. You're probably living a good, life.
I was actually, in the equity division of his savings and loan. And in those days, savings and loans could actually invest in real estate and do joint ventures and own properties and act, and.
Wasn't that when the savings and loan crisis happened in the 90s?
Yes, it was a bad idea. Yeah.
Okay.
And, give a developer a bank and, it's not good news.
Yeah.
And so my partner approached me and said, "Hey, how would you like to be my partner?" And it didn't pay anything. And he said, "Hey, it's even worse." I go, "How could it be worse? Not getting paid anything."
Yeah.
Because we have to put up half the money. And I said, "Well, this is the craziest thing I heard. I don't want to do it."
Yeah.
So I'm doing well, and then the savings and loan crisis hits, and my bank gets taken over, and I sign up with the Resolution Trust Corporation to be a consultant to liquidate the bank's real estate for them for a couple of years, and then that runs out. And I said, "Well, what am I going to do?" So there weren't, real estate was much worse than the great financial crisis. I mean,
really,
it was just horrible. The banks were going broke. So what chance did you have?
Right. You couldn't get any money.
And the policy was foreclose. That was government policy. Clean up the mess. So,
wow.
I mean, values tumbled. It just was a mess. But we knew it was a great opportunity. But so the first thing I did is I became a receiver, and because that was a big business back then. I wanted to get.
There's been a couple people on this couch who were also receivers as well
in the 90s.
In the 90s,
it's like what you did.
Got it. So you would basically be hired by a bank to manage and run these assets.
Yeah, and since I was with a bank and I was on loan committee, and a lot of my employees went to work in the REO departments of other banks, I was able to get business.
Got it.
And so the second thing I did was I called my partner up and I said, "I'm ready. Let's do it."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Hey, I'm messed up. Don't you read the newspapers? You want to think I'm going to go out and do deals now? I'm trying to survive."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was already in some pain.
Yeah. So that didn't pan out initially, but at that point I went out and searched for a partner, and I was paying the bills through the receiver business.
Got it. So,
and
do you remember your first deal?
Yes. I found a Israeli who had a billionaire partner, and he was going to give me a piece of his deal. And so...
and you were going to manage it? Or
I would find it and run it, and he had a property management company, so he was going to manage.
So you're like, "Hey, you go find the deal."
But I would be the asset manager
and
do the leasing.
Got it. So a little sweat equity?
Yes, all sweat equity.
Wow.
And so, the first deal I did was I bought an office building in Santa Monica at $60 a foot. Jeez. And it had previously it had peaked at $220 a foot.
Even then it was $220 a foot?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
Man, that's crazy to think, because there's some buildings in downtown LA that are selling for $100, $120 a foot. That's a full cycle. So you bought this office building, and I assume your job was like, "Okay, now what do I do next?"
Well, we bought the office building, and I had to try to lease it. So I was actively involved in trying to lease it, and we came up with the concept of spec suites. And
what's that?
You basically build out the suite. Before that, you basically would give the guy a TI list. You get $10 for walls. You get
like
so
spec
much.
homes. You would build out the spec offices. You're like, hey, we built this really cool office, like move in.
Suit.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so and this is in the 90s. So you're doing this office, you're renovating it, you're leasing it up, and then when
At
does
the same time, I'm still looking for more properties. So
are you looking at apartments or are you looking at everything?
Well, the advantage of office buildings back then, I was looking at apartments too.
Okay.
And the advantage of office buildings is that, when apartments get a cold, office buildings are on their deathbed. That's pretty much how it works.
Yeah.
So you can get, you were able to get incredible values. I mean, I think I bought the ground floor of Rosen, Maine, for like $95 a foot from a bank.
Jeez.
With that venture.
What do you think it's worth now?
It probably peaked, that ground floor probably peaked at like $900 a foot. I have no idea. It's all retail. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really follow retail.
But that's still that's crazy. And then when did things start taking off? Because you're
so then so that venture didn't work out. The Israeli ended up having a fight with the billionaire, and
seeing that happen from time to time.
It didn't really pan out. So then about the same time, I started doing deals with my partner. I mean, LA was really, it was just, the defense industry had, the end of the Cold War had just destroyed the defense industry. We used to have major defense, Northrop was
massive
located
company
here, and the banks were leaving. So LA was really
falling out of fashion.
Yeah, and they even made some movies about it. They had Grand Canyon with Steve Martin, and about, how bad LA was. And
I'll have to watch that.
Yeah, a classic scene where one of the actors, his car gets stuck in South LA, and, he gets into trouble with gangs.
Got it. Yeah.
Danny Glover comes and bails him out.
Because the Rodney King riots were in
94.
Yeah. So the 90s were a tough period.
Well, no,
for
sorry,
LA.
92. Sorry.
Okay.
The riots, and the earthquake was in 94.
Jeez. So LA had a decade.
Yeah. So it was really a mess. But my partner and I started doing deals in Phoenix, small deals, and they turned out to be successful. And it was hard to convince investors that you could make money in real estate anymore. But we started making some money in real estate, and then he went to his investors, and we convinced them that, you can actually make money in real estate, and it was probably a really good time to invest in value. I mean, values were incredibly low.
Yeah.
So I tried to do some apartment deals, and things didn't work out. I mean, I just, by luck, I tied up one building with, this was an interesting story. I can kind of tell
please.
you. So I'm buying a deal from Fannie Mae, an apartment project, and they called everyone in to interview them, and they asked me, is there any reason why you wouldn't do this deal? And I said, well, yeah, I mean, it's my due diligence period. I could find something. And they go, next. So
wow.
The buyer they chose fell out of escrow. And they called me in again, and they said, is there any reason you wouldn't do this deal? And I said, absolutely no reason, 100% done.
You learned your lesson on that one.
But it turned out that my partner, looked at the deal, and he was worried about the waterproofing. I mean, deals were so cheap then. We could have.
Yeah.
I forgot what the thing was selling for, like $45,000 a unit.
Jeez. Was it like what construction? 60s, 70s?
It was like 70s.
So the play still in LA was value add. Value add was still a thing back then.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. We did. Yeah. In fact, my partner did a lot of value add deals in apartments.
Got it. And when did it explode? Because you guys have now 1,000 units, 700 of them are in 3 buildings. And then you also have some creative office space in San Francisco. When did it turn into?
Well, he did his apartment deals in the 80s.
Got it.
So, and then he built one of them. He built in the 90s.
Got it. So you kind of were able to
And then,
assimilate through the
family,
partnership.
I had family properties.
Got it.
And so we weren't really, it ended up, we didn't do apartments. We ended up doing really office buildings.
And then, so the office, and you told me this,
and that was
in San Francisco.
around, we got our first deal. We bought a deal at 501 Colorado in Santa Monica for like $90 a foot.
Wow.
In 1994 with my partner. And then from there, we continued. And so the problem back then was leasing the buildings. You could buy them, but we were still just coming out of the recession. But luckily, LA had regenerated itself, and the television had gone from, or cable had gone from, or television had gone from like 12 channels to infinite channels. So all of these production companies began to invade LA and needed space.
Got it. So you're leasing them out.
We couldn't lease the buildings. They were difficult. We were doing the spec suites, but it was really slow. So one day a broker pitched me. He said, I have this need. The studios are going crazy and they have no room left. And they're moving all the post-production companies and producers off the studio. And I need people to buy warehouses and convert them to office. And it's like, wait a minute. Said the only people that occupy warehouses are call centers.
Yeah.
Like who would want, because my experience, my day in office was, people wanted a high rise with a great view, a corner office with as many windows as possible.
Yeah.
So he pitched this thing called Creative Office to me to buy these warehouses. And I said, hey, I'll tell you what, I have a bunch of empty office space. Let me take one of them and I'll make it look like a warehouse. And he said, no, that's not going to work. You need the ceiling heights and the power, because in those days, the post companies had big Avid machines. So I went ahead anyway, and we called it deconstruction. We took the acoustical ceilings off and we put rigid ducting and reorganized the electrical and polished the floors and made it look like an industrial building.
Like a warehouse.
Yeah.
Wow. And did it lease?
Yeah. Amazing. It just, in a week.
Wow.
And then we did another and another and another and another. And then eventually I said, hey, I'll take a look at those warehouses now. So that's sort of how the, Creative Office came about.
And now, in today, what is the current assets under management, or what does the portfolio look like?
Like I said, we have about 1,000 apartment units.
Okay.
And about 350,000 square feet of legacy office product.
Got it. And
really creative office, and most of them are converted warehouses, single level warehouses.
Are those in
Culver City, Venice,
so a lot in SoCal,
West LA,
and some in San Francisco?
I have
too.
a couple of buildings left in San Francisco. I had sold most of the portfolio there.
Got it.
And we kept a couple of buildings because we really believed in San Francisco.
Do you believe San Francisco is a good buy right now?
I do. Yeah.
Why do you say that?
I just think it's a very cyclical city, and it's got a lot of talent and a lot of good things going for it. And, if you believe that it's not systemic, that it's really cyclical, it would be a good buy.
In terms of where the basis is today.
Yeah.
No, I'm from Sacramento too. So for me, San Francisco was always a place where we'd go, on the weekends or school trips or places like that. And it was always wonderful. I always enjoyed it. And it was the city, and it felt safe and clean. And I think I've seen too, from being involved in the Southern California, cleaning up Los Angeles, a lot of people from San Francisco came down because they've made a lot of headway and progress in cleaning up that city and making it a place where young people want to live and work, and old people want to live and work and feel safe. And so I think with that process in place, it's only a matter of time before people feel the magic of that city again, which again behooves itself for investing. And when you can pick up deals at the cap rates and the bases we are today, they're not building, they're not going to, there's a 7-mile radius in San Francisco. It's not a forever, you can't build forever. So I think those are good fundamentals to look at when you're investing, which is why Los Angeles, I think, is a great place to invest too, because it's not like Texas. You can't just keep continuing to build. There's natural barriers that cause the supply demand fundamentals to make sense.
Well, they're trying to densify, right?
Yeah.
So that's one technique.
Yeah.
They just keep.
We know how hard that is, though.
Well, and they just keep hurting themselves. So they keep one step forward, 2 steps back.
Speaking of that, I followed you on LinkedIn, and you've put a lot of thought, and you're very in tune with a lot of the regulations and laws. What do you think of the current state of Los Angeles? Like, what is going on with this city?
Well, it's complex.
Yeah.
There's we generated ourselves into in the entertainment industry, and that is attempting to find its footing. The one thing that we do have that really helps LA is we have a incredible tech community here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the startup market has been impacted also, and it's been down, but there's a terrific startup market of tech companies in what we call techtainment, which is the intersection of tech and entertainment, and also advertising, digital advertising. And that particular industry could break out. We also have still, mostly in the South Bay, but it is spreading here, a very large, what I call hard tech, which is defense, technology companies. Warfare may be mostly by cyber and drones in the futures.
Yeah, Hawthorne and Gardena, those areas down there.
So there is, that industry that could break out. So we really just need to break out.
It feels like, though, in the news, and again, this is the news, so they always have their own agendas, but it feels like that everything I hear is Tesla's moving out of California, Wells Fargo's moving, whatever, these big companies are all leaving California because they feel like it's not a business-friendly state. And the city of Los Angeles, I'm hearing from owners when I'm talking to them, it's so hard to be a landlord. The regulations keep getting worse. I can't make any money. My insurance is keeping going up. Like, what is the bullish case for Los Angeles? Or in your view, do you feel like Los Angeles is a bullish case that it can rebound and continue to grow?
Well, I think it can rebound because people do want to live here. And it is expensive to live here, so you have to give them something. We've always attracted the best and the brightest, and that has always been a big plus for LA. And because people do want to live here for, the entertainment's insanely good. Sports, concerts, look at how many sports teams we have.
New stadiums.
The weather, beaches. I mean, it's really a great place to live, but it's very expensive in the politics. I can only relate it to the 90s, where the negativism existed then and we never thought. And it could be always one election away from something great happening or doom.
Mm-hmm.
And back in the 90s, suddenly we got this mayor named Richard Riordan, and he was amazing.
Yeah.
And he did amazing things, and he really helped allow the recovery to occur.
Mm-hmm. So you feel like we're in a place where we're moving towards that, where we could have that rebound?
It's just a matter of luck. There's a lot of also more disappointing demographics. We have also a large population of very low income people, and there's definitely a clash.
Yeah.
But I think LA could break out if the right circumstances fall into place.
I sure hope so. Yeah. Just for being here for 8 years now and seeing just in that time period, it's changed. I really do.
Well, I told you my dream, so
yeah. I know. Waking up in Newport Beach. What is your current buy box? What are you looking at? Are you looking at deals? Where are you looking your next move?
Yeah, interesting question. I am looking at, our basic concept has since the 90s has been to take advantage of the cycles. So we're looking
buy low.
Yeah, buy low. I mean, I think the only problem is that with that strategy is that it could be a long time between acquisitions and buying, and at some point you could run out of runway.
The cycles have been very long for.
Yes, so you could run out of runway. Yes. But we'll be looking at, opportunistic situations where the cycle dictates.
Do you feel like
program.
we're for apartments in LA? Do you feel like there's opportunities right now, or do you?
I think that if you now my problem is I have too many rent-controlled apartments, but you could tell that.
What do you mean by that? Too many?
Well, I mean, I have a larger part of my portfolio are rent-controlled apartments. So
why is it a bad thing?
Well, I'm subject to political risk, right? So, I mean, we just. Went through 3 near-death experiences, right? We had Prop 10, Prop 21, and Prop 33.
Yeah.
And, thank God for the CAA and Tom Bannon and his, brilliance.
Yeah.
That we survived. But
so that political risk for you feels like there needs to be some diversification. And for you,
I can tell you that at my age, I've learned that diversification is the key.
Is a good thing.
Yes. After a while, when you start out, you can't diversify. You have to go all in. But after a while, as your wealth, increases, it becomes advantageous to diversify.
A safety
even out of real estate into other things.
Because it's funny, people say, put all your eggs in one basket because you have a specialization. But
well, when you're younger, you have no choice.
Yeah.
Right? You have nothing to diversify.
Yeah.
You go all in. But over time, you potentially may want to consider changing when you have the or not changing, but diversifying when you have the opportunity.
So for you, what I'm hearing you say is that you're looking for ways to diversify out of rent control into non-rent control.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Okay. And what does that look like for you over the last couple of years?
I've bought a lot of smaller new construction projects for myself. I feel that they're least likely to put restrictive rent control
on small properties.
There is a group of progressives. They're called capitalist progressives versus the socialist progressives.
Okay.
And they do believe that developers need incentives.
Funny how that makes sense.
They usually will join with the moderates and protect new construction. So
you feel
that's probably the safest part. Otherwise, if I knew if I wanted to board planes or I had confidence in remote management, I'd go elsewhere. But because we like to have very hands-on asset management, I prefer to try to find something in Los Angeles that I can do.
Does that philosophy, was that something learned, or was that just something that you've always felt was important to your thesis?
Oh, just my operating style.
The way that you do it.
Yeah.
You want to feel it, touch it, see it, be able to handle fires, issues, things like
Correct,
that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's been many circumstances where that's been very helpful.
It has, yeah.
And useful. So you've obviously bought many deals in your career. How do you find a deal, and what does that negotiation process look like for you? Because you don't strike me as someone who's, easy. You're going to negotiate and make sure you get a good deal for your investors and yourself. Is that fair?
Well, most of the time you're not, I wouldn't call it a negotiation.
Okay.
Most of the time you're, I've usually bought in the part of the cycle where things have been down and then they're starting to recover. That's been sort of our favorite part of the cycle. It's a point where we think we could lease and things are slightly getting better.
You're
They're
catching
pretty
it on the
low,
upstream.
It's still pretty depressing.
Yeah. Well, right now, and I don't know when. It doesn't feel like we're there yet. I mean, it feels like there's other factors, mainly the interest rates, which are causing a lot of the cycle where we're in. And Los Angeles has the headwinds of the regulation risks, which is also compounding on top of that, which I think is why it's fallen out of favor pretty significantly with, again, the big institutional firms, but even the smaller private investors that I speak to, they want to buy in LA County, but non LA city properties because they feel like the political risk is there. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on timing. And I know, if you had a magic crystal ball, we probably wouldn't be talking here. You'd be on a boat in Jamaica or something like that. But when do you, if you had to guess, when do you think that time is going to occur?
Well, I think there's two factors you need to look at.
Okay.
One is interest rates, and the other one is rents. And if interest rates go down, there'll be a lot more buying. If rents go up, there'll be a lot more buying. So we might be a few years away on the rent side, because, luckily we're not oversupplied. 5% vacancy isn't horrible.
Yeah.
But LA does really well when it's at between 3 and 4.
Yep. And we're good.
It does really bad when it's 6.
Yeah.
So, and at a 5, some areas are still increasing. You just don't want to be there. Or not everyone wants to be there. And then some areas are going slightly down or going down in rent, but on the balance, it's probably pretty even.
You've seen many cycles in your day. And
yeah, so I think we need interest rates to either go down or rents to go up. And, interest rates can go down.
And that would help a lot.
Like the 80s, lights on, lights off.
Relieve the pressure. Yeah. You've seen a bunch of cycles over the years. And if I'm looking, again, the history buff in me goes back and looks at pricing of where deals were selling. I think over the last 20 years, and maybe this stops in like 21, 22, but there was a 20-year cycle in Los Angeles where the prices and values and the cap rate compression, like it was just going up and to the right. Do you feel like that 20-year period or that growth, there's potential on the backside in the future, in the year 2050, is it even possible to have the same level of growth those previous 20 years as it is in the future? And the reason I ask that is because a lot of young people my age who want to get into the investing side of the business feel like they've missed the boat, feel like, man, well, these people were buying properties at $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a door, and now they're up at $300,000, $350,000, $400,000. Are we going to be seeing buildings at $1 million a unit, $1.2 million, like that? $2 million, like the growth metrics start to make your brain question whether it's possible. So, do you feel like young people have missed the boat in terms of that growth period?
No, I mean there's other opportunities that always occur, and so I don't think they missed the boat period. I think the only thing that in my career we experienced was like 30 years of declining interest rates, long-term declining interest rates, which caused cap rates to decline. I mean, I remember at a certain point I called my partner and I said, in France, the cap rates are 6%. Can you believe how low they are? Do you think? And he said, well, it's been that way for a while there.
Wow.
So, and I used to have a license plate on my car that said I break for 10 caps.
Wow.
Because those were good cap rates.
Yeah.
Decent cap rates versus 8.
For sure.
So, yeah.
Well, we're seeing 7s and 8s right now in certain pockets, but.
I don't think you have the advantage, but you could have the advantage of great growth. There's, is it going to happen in LA? It could. We could have micro neighborhoods take off. So.
Because, the reason it's so curious to me is because when I'm thinking about it from an investment standpoint, most people, I would say, use real estate as a storage of wealth, not necessarily a wealth generation. There's the few syndicators who, if you look at it compared to the S&P and you do value add, you can make money. But for most people, it's a storage of wealth. And so I think the question a lot of people have, especially with tech, the way that's boomed, there's so many different industries that grow or can grow significantly faster than real estate. It's interesting to think about, is real estate going to be more of a storage over the next decade, or is it going to be that money maker, that growth where you can make a significant amount of income and live off that?
I think there'll be obviously areas where there'll be incredible opportunity.
In LA or across the country?
I think across the country. It
Okay.
could happen in LA.
Yeah.
LA has a lot of great dynamics.
You don't think LA's baked out?
We regenerate. And, we've done, having lived through the 90s and that experience, what the Marcus and Millchap guy who says, keep your eyes on the horizon, keep your eyes on the horizon. I mean, something will occur and you just have to keep your awareness and look for it and it'll be happening. I mean, as I said, in the 90s, we didn't know what was going to save LA. And all of a sudden, came the information superhighway. And then after that, it was followed by the internet boom.
Yeah.
And my God, there was in like 1999, I mean, tenants were calling me, looking for space. So in office space, I mean, it was insane.
Different time.
So, but we didn't know what the internet was in 93. We had no idea. We never even heard the word. Keep your eye on the horizon.
Things could change, AI, for sure. If you were like 30 years old today and you didn't have the portfolio and you were starting from scratch, what would you do?
Would I stay in LA? Probably not. I'd go elsewhere. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there's some incredibly high growth markets that are, going through some bad times with very low prices now.
Any
There's
come to mind?
Some incredible opportunities out there.
Do any cities come to mind?
I think they're the, usual Sunbelt cities and, opportunists and smart people are already going there.
Yeah. Okay. So I must see, you were in Phoenix. Phoenix kind of took off over the last 10 years. Arizona, Texas, the Carolinas, I think has been super hot. Florida. So many people are moving their money to Florida, which is interesting to me because insurance is not the easiest to deal with. So I guess looking forward.
Well, like I said, you might find some of those areas are probably oversupplied.
Yeah.
But, there might be some great opportunities there and there's terrific growth. And
one of the things that I've been fascinated by, and we talked about this a little bit before we started filming, but you have been active on social media and that side of the business. And I'm curious to know, as someone who's been in the business for a very long time, most would assume that, and you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and it doesn't seem to be the case for you. So what prompted you to get more on the social side, and what has that been like? What's your experience been like being part of that community?
I haven't seen enormous dividends from it, but at the moment, it keeps me in contact with a lot of brokers.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's a good it's actually, for me, it's been a good acquisition strategy. And, it benefits me with lenders and, they got me on your podcast. Right?
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. I think your portfolio speaks for itself. So I think I'm lucky to have you on here. But do you enjoy writing? Like, is that your creative
I do, yeah,
outlet?
A little bit.
Your posts on LinkedIn are incredible. And that's something that I really enjoy is you go pretty deep and you understand the fundamentals of what's underneath what everyone's saying. You're like, okay, here's actually what's happening. And that's very helpful. I find it very, educational.
Yeah. At UCLA, I had a job as a researcher in market research. So I've always had that interest in doing market research. And a lot of our strategies have been based on research and my research of the cycles over the years.
So you got really deep. And are you analytical by
Very
nature?
analytical, yeah.
Okay, so you like to look at patterns and numbers.
Yeah, love it.
I'm super curious as what is a day in the life of Jeff Palmer look like?
Well, now it's really, a lot of it is just asset management. But we're always looking for new opportunities. There's a lot of strategy, so it's everything. We use a program called Asana.
Mm-hmm.
So
I use Asana.
Yeah, I'm usually on Asana communicating with my staff. And
so you're working on products. So is your role, obviously you're making sure you're the final check, but like, are you guys talking about leasing space? Are you talking about social stuff, like the social media stuff? I'm just curious to know, because you have a portfolio, you have enough money where you're not trying to chase like more money. You enjoy this clearly. Like, are you getting the office? Are you reading the newspaper?
I think what the key is that I would love to do all the fun stuff and none of the bad, and have none of the aggravation.
Yeah.
So I'm still searching for that.
So it's putting a lot of fires out. When you got a portfolio as big as you do, what's the assets under management right now? Do you guys have any idea?
The market value fluctuates, especially when you have an office portfolio.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yes.
Things change. Well, before we wrap up, I like to ask people kind of what advice they'd give to some younger listeners. There's someone who is Jeff Palmer, 50 years in the future. What would you tell them? What would you say if they want to be you?
I would look for opportunity and find investors.
And how do you find investors?
Well, today it might be social media. It might be coming up with a great idea or a great plan. It could be, just knowledge, having idea of where a great deal is, and then pitching it.
How much do you think luck has to play with that?
Well, if you can find yourself in the right side of the cycle, it really helps.
So you think they should be looking to buy over the next 5 years? Do you think it's a good time for someone to get in?
I think you just have to wait and look for that opportunity.
And there's good deals in every market.
And there'll be a period when the opportunities will, just emerge. I mean, look at, people that went out to state to buy apartments in 2021. I mean, my God, they were just, new sponsors were, growing on trees, and young people could go and, one of my interns went out and, he had worked for 5 years, but he went out on his own and went ahead and acquired a small portfolio of 3 buildings with 220 units.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, when things are hot.
Yeah. Jeez, that's incredible.
So, and it's a little harder when things are not hot, right? When things are cold, but that's sometimes the best time to do it. So, I mean, I went out and, it was rough and solicited. And I even tell my young people, they go, well, why can't you just go to your investors and tell them to invest now? I said, I'm cutting their distributions. Do you think they really want to invest with me now?
Yeah, exactly.
You have to wait until, things get a little better. But, it's a great time to go out and find, if you see the opportunity and it's there, put a package together and go and pitch.
This is the last thing, and I promise, and I'll wrap up. How do you manage investors? What's the best way to manage those relationships?
Well, my partner does that. That's the best way to do it.
You get a partner who enjoys that.
You really have to be very communicative with them. And I could tell you, look, we've had deals that we've owned for 30 plus years with investors, and I'm as committed to those investors today as I was 30 years ago. I mean, I'm going to see all the deals through and make sure they make money and are happy. Well, they've made their money already, but
they must be pretty happy staying 30 years. You must have done something all right.
It's kind of like, what have you done for me lately, type of thing. So I'm going to go full cycle even over that long of a time period.
I love it. Jeff, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it. This was amazing. And where can people find you?
My website's jeff@pmiproperties.com.
Okay. And PMI Properties is the company, and look out for Jeff on social media. They're growing the presence.
I'm on LinkedIn.
He's on LinkedIn. Yeah. There we go. Give him a follow. And we want to thank you very much for being here.
Sure. Thanks.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.